House Bill 226. Delegate Guyton, and I know you have a panel, so whenever you're ready, Delegate Guyton, you can begin.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Michelle Guyton from District 42B in Baltimore County, and I am here to thank you for your consideration of House Bill 226. I woke up this morning knowing that this was a very good day. I feel blessed to be in front of you and offering all of us the opportunity to achieve what I believe is our most important charge as legislators, and that's to protect our most vulnerable students and our citizens. So those of us who are parents, we often take for granted daily check-ins with our kids. I know that I have 3 boys, and I can remember like very excited kindergarten conversations about new colors and learning about new countries and being able to spell a word. And then I also am very well aware that someday, especially in middle school and high school, I got grunts or rebuffs or mom, leave me alone. But whether they chose to tell me about their day or not at all, I knew that they could. Right? And I also knew that if I had concerns, I could get to the bottom of the situation and eventually get to the truth. But many of our constituents, most of the people you'll hear from today, they don't get to take those routine check-ins for granted. So their children get off the bus from school and they cannot talk to their parents about their day. They can't share the positives and the great things and tell them about their friends, and they can't answer parent concerns, even if the child is clearly upset. Even if that child is literally bruised and broken at the end of the day. And as you will hear, they have been, and they are. So House Bill 226 protects these students and their families by requiring cameras in self-contained special education classrooms where these children spend the majority of their day in our public school system. This committee has heard this bill before in other postures. This is the 3rd time I've come before you. And for whatever reason, this committee has chosen in the past not to move it. So I have worked with advocates, with teachers, with the state's attorney's office to refine the language of this bill, really anyone who would have a conversation with me about it over the interim. And I do believe very strongly that any issues that are raised in the couple of letters expressing concern that you have in the packet have been addressed in this year's legislation. So new language ensuring that concerns about access to video and confidentiality have been addressed. There's new language in the bill that guarantees that the video will not be monitored ever without cause and will not be used for teacher evaluation. So House Bill 226 has a dual purpose though. The bill does ensure the safety of vulnerable students, but it also protects teachers from allegations of abuse that can be difficult to prove or to disprove. This body has prioritized protection of vulnerable populations for many years with our investment and requirements regarding police body cameras. In just this past year, 2021 alone, we spent $32.4 million on this important initiative to protect the public. House Bill 226 is certainly consistent with these priorities and much less expensive. So in the last 3 years that the public, our constituents, have come to this committee, ripping the Band-Aids off of their pain over and over again, and begging us to act, to do something, to protect children who cannot speak for themselves. The following children have, and I must say, allegedly suffered in our school system. In Prince George's County, multiple kindergartens in an autism classroom who were nonverbal were hit and pushed by staff. A child came home missing teeth with a bloodied lip. A parent watching virtually while their child was home was able to report these incidents to the school system, and they're under investigation, but videos aren't admissible. So there really is no evidence that any of this occurred. A 5-year-old child in Anne Arundel County has regressed and cries every day. She keeps smacking herself on the bottom, something that her parents don't do, and comes home every day hoarse from crying or screaming. They're not sure. A 4-year-old in Baltimore County came home with burns up and down his back that have never been explained by the teachers. And over 7,000 cases of abuse of special education students in Frederick County alone have recently been exposed. It's hard for me to believe that if we had passed this bill 3 years ago, many of these injuries would not have happened, and these children and their families, your constituents, would not have suffered in this way. It's time for us to just stop making excuses and ask ourselves what we would do if they were our own children in this situation. I know how I will vote, and I implore you to do the same and to give a favorable report to House Bill 226. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Lori Scott. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having me again today for the third time. I'm in support of House Bill 226 to allow video surveillance in self-contained special education classrooms in Maryland. My daughter's a 19-year-old who has significant cognitive disabilities, in a wheelchair, and very limited verbal skills. She's unable to come home and talk to me about her day or to ward off any harm that may come her way. 3 years ago, in her self-contained public high school in Howard County, Maryland, where she attends, a paraprofessional grabbed the arms of a nonverbal autistic student, shook him, and released him into desks. It took 3 days for someone to come forward and report it to the principal, and 5 more days for the investigation to occur. Finally, the parents were then notified, the aide was suspended, and the child she abused was relocated to another school. After the aide's suspension, she returned to school due to representation from the union and got her job back. She returned to the classroom to be my daughter's aide. Needless to say, that wasn't going to work, and she was terminated. There have been multiple investigations and abuse incidents in Maryland over the years. Disability Right Maryland investigated Hickory Ridge Elementary School in 2014-15, where 10 students in one special education self-contained class were being abused. Teacher and aides were using spray bottles to spray water in kids' faces, banging rolling pins on desks to scare autistic kids, and chasing them with strong odored markers. This is abuse and would have been caught on cameras had they been available. You're going to hear heartbreaking stories today. We cannot allow this to continue. School should not hurt. There are 5 states who already have this law or a similar law in self-contained classrooms. Thank you, Mr. Dustin Brin from Disability Rights Texas, who stepped in the gap for the Texas students and for being here today, and the Disability Rights West Virginia, Mr. Cook, for providing us testimony. They're invaluable lessons that we need to learn from states around the country. We already have cameras in hallways and in vestibules all over the place in our schools, and we have large data servers, none of which you ask to pay for or you ask to allow them to be. We have cameras on our buses. Please, delegates, we need you to step into the gap right now to require school systems to install cameras in self-contained special education classrooms to stop abuse and harm for nonverbal, vulnerable students and to protect our teachers from exiting classrooms unnecessarily. Please support House Bill 226. Thank you.
Thank you. State's Attorney Rich Gibson from the magnificent Howard County. Hello, my friend.
How are you, Chair Atterbury? Good to see you. Good to see everyone. I have a lot of friends on the committee. It was good to see so many wonderful faces. So I'm State's Attorney for Howard County, but I'm also a career prosecutor with nearly 18 years of experience prosecuting cases in 3 jurisdictions within Maryland, those being Prince George's County, Baltimore City, and now Howard County. I'm here to urge a favorable report for this bill, and I hope that you will all support it. The bill, if passed, will offer a level of protection to the weakest among us, special needs students who are non-communicative due to mental, physical, or emotional disabilities. It also protects those who work in schools from false allegations of preying on an extremely vulnerable class of people. 2 quick examples of incidents that happened in Howard County that weren't in the school setting, but were close enough related to it that directly would be impacted by this kind of bill are: 1, a few years ago, before I was elected into office in Howard County, there was a non-communicative child who because of her disability, couldn't share what was going on with her orally. She was acting strangely. Her parents noticed odd behavior, and they complained. Luckily, the incidents of abuse were occurring on the bus, and there was a camera on the bus which captured the abuse, which allowed us to hold accountable the individuals abusing her and end the abuse, the cycle of abuse that was being brought upon that young child. Another example, in the other direction, I had a case that I reviewed here in Howard County where a daycare provider was accused of sexually assaulting the children in their care. There was video in the daycare center that captured the area where where the children and the daycare provider were interacting. And we watched 30 days of video and were able to determine that no abuse occurred, thus exonerating this daycare provider. I had an opportunity to review the written testimony submitted by the ACLU against the bill, in opposition to the bill, and I wanted to address that quickly if I could. They argue that there are students with disabilities that are overrepresented in disciplinary proceedings, and they believe that surveillance will increase the disproportionate treatment of those individuals. They further state that Black students receive a disproportionate amount of disciplinary actions, including arrest, and the presence of the video may negatively impact that. To those arguments, I would respond, what is offensive to our sensibilities is when similarly situated people in similar circumstances are treated differently based on color, gender, religion, national origin, or in this instance, disability. I hope no one is arguing that wrongful conduct should not be punished, but rather that similarly situated people should be extended the same benefits or receive the same sanction for their similar conduct. Just like body-worn camera for police, the video in this case acts to preserve the truth of interactions that occur in the classroom. So if the argument is that Black students or disabled students are being unfairly treated, why wouldn't we want video evidence to support that the presence of that so we can do something to stop that unfair treatment? Same argument for anyone with disabilities or minority students.
I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap up.
Absolutely. Conversely, in that same environment, teachers and administrators in that space accused of behaving with bias would have a record to show they were actually behaving in an appropriate way. You can just go to the video. I ask that you support House Bill 226. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Melissa Rosenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Melissa Rosenberg with the Howard County Autism Society, and I'm here today on behalf of the Autism Society and Pathfinders for Autism. We collectively submitted our testimony today to express our strong support for House Bill 226 and appreciate the opportunity to come before you. We're hoping that the third time will be the charm. We have supported this bill all 3 times and hope that you will give a favorable report. The number of stories continue to grow each year of camera footage capturing abuse of our children in schools. And yet for every one of these instances, there are many more reported or suspected cases of abuse that could be confirmed or refuted if there was a systematic way to capture video evidence in the matter. We're all acutely aware of the ruling by the Department of Justice right here in our own state when staff from Frederick County Public Schools illegally restrained students with disabilities. Our non-speaking children with autism and other disabilities could never have shared this with their family and loved ones that they had been harmed, but a camera may have captured and possibly prevented these incidents. Children in special education classrooms are especially vulnerable to abuse because they often lack the ability to fully communicate any concerns adequately, creating the potential for egregious and continuing victimization. We also believe that this bill, as written, addresses any potential concerns about the use of cameras for monitoring teachers, and it sets forth clear guidelines for viewing the recordings. In our opinion, it's a balanced bill and provides much needed protections to our most vulnerable children and does not endanger the privacy of the children or staff. To that end, we recommend that the implementation of this important protection be done with sufficient planning to provide consistency across the state. It's imperative that the school systems, staff, and parents can be confident that this key initiative is installed with rigor and efficacy and with proper safeguards. Thank you in advance for your strong consideration in supporting this bill for the protection of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Ellen Calgary, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members, and I want to thank especially the incredible work of Delegate Guyton in addressing these important and serious issues. The attorneys in my law firm represent children and adults with disabilities throughout Maryland. And for over 4 decades, I have worked to protect the most vulnerable members of our community, children and adults with disabilities. I began in 1979 as an assistant attorney general, and through today, I have a private law firm where we represent children and adults with disabilities. This is such an important issue. The parents of our clients watch in horror as their children come home off the bus with bruises, burns, broken bones, and no one can tell them how it happened. The greatest benefit of this bill, if it becomes law, is that these parents can have a proactive discussion with school staff members to say, how can we prevent this from ever happening again? And really analyze what steps need to be taken to protect their children. I similarly have had a case where my client was abused on a special needs bus, and we were able to find the perpetrators because there was video footage, and those individuals were actually fired. The damage had still been done, but the video footage helped us. So I urge this committee to give a favorable report for House Bill 226, and I thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you. Next, Tracy Monroe for 2 minutes, please.
Hello. I'm the parent of a 6-year-old kindergartner in Harford County Public Schools. My child has a robust IEP, and I'm very involved despite this. So I get upset. My little one was dragged through the halls of their elementary school in some non-sanctioned restraint procedure to a quiet room or a segregated classroom. This was done over 40 times by multiple staff, including admin and special educators. I have never given permission for restraint or seclusion use. When I asked if my small child was being restrained or secluded, I was told over and over again, no. They held ground that this was MSD's definition of an escort. I persisted to see footage, which was only available on hallway cameras. After the footage was viewed by Central, they acknowledged that this was not simply a transport or escort, as I was led to believe. No one believed me or my child. Without this footage, I had no proof of what my child had gone through. My 6-year-old has also spent significant time in a self-contained classroom at the school. My child was in this room with only staff and no peers for hours on end. I'll never know what happened in that room, as there were no cameras. My kindergartner was transported multiple times within that room to a corner made of gym mats. The window to the room was also covered with opaque paper after they began using the room for my child. My little one has been severely traumatized after only 4 months of kindergarten in our districted public Harford County Elementary School, and I'm left to pick up the pieces and try to make this right for my child. I ask you to support House Bill 226 as we clearly need cameras in the classrooms to protect the community's most vulnerable children.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your story with us today. Next, we have Andy Kopp for 2 minutes, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman Atterbury, members of the committee. My name is Andy Kopp, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the ARC Maryland in support of HB 226. And the ARC Maryland is the largest statewide advocacy organization dedicated to protecting and advancing the rights and quality of life of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we've worked with the bill sponsor and other advocates over the past 2 years on this legislation to get it to its current state. It's very important to the ARC and our members that cameras be used appropriately and not be used to monitor teacher performance or student behavior, or to be used in placement decisions of students. And we're pleased that this bill contains protections against all of those uses. Our only goals are to provide information to administrators and law enforcement to do their best job in the investigation of alleged abuse or neglect, to deter abuse and neglect, and to provide parents with reliable information We believe this bill this session has been perfected to achieve the greatest good and address the previous concerns and strengthen protections for students with disabilities and teachers in self-contained special education classrooms. And I've heard from parents as well whose children have come home from school with unexplained injuries or reports indicating that a student engaged in behavior resulting in self-inflicted injury. But sometimes the reports don't add up and parents are unable to obtain resolution. So they face uncertainty and fear for their child, fear of retaliation if they pursue the matter further. And access to video footage would enable a school to review an incident and to understand what may have occurred during an incident and then respond appropriately. In addition, we're currently experiencing a severe shortage of teachers, especially special education teachers. We can't afford the teachers to be removed from classrooms based on erroneous allegations, even for a short period of time. So we believe this legislation will accomplish two primary goals of giving a voice to the students who use non-traditional communication who otherwise face barriers to reliably recalling or relaying what may have happened to them, but also providing a tool for thorough and expeditious investigations that will help to remove teachers who are bad actors, but also expeditiously exonerate those who have been erroneously accused of wrongdoing and return them to the classroom. So in conclusion, I want to thank the sponsors for the work on this legislation and the committee for your consideration, and I respectfully ask for a favorable report on House Bill 226. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Dustin Reidners is testifying for informational purposes only. Whenever you're ready. Is he on? Okay, maybe he had to hop off. I was calling him because he had to hop off. So we will move on. Next, Dustin Brin for 2 minutes, please.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Dustin Brin. I'm the father of an 8-year-old autistic son. That's Ashton. And we hear these words, but I don't know that it's easily digested. I really want you to imagine you're going to school every day and you're being abused, mentally, physically, verbally abused. And you go home and you can't tell your parents. And they take you back to school for it to happen again the next day. And then you go home again and you can't tell a principal and you can't tell an aide and you can't tell help because you have no voice to protect yourself. And you start to wonder, why would my parent take me to keep getting abused every day? And they don't understand the type of trauma that they're going through. And it's happening all over this country. And it happened in our backyards in Frederick County at Caramana Elementary School, where an aide documented 2 years of abuse from a special needs teacher. During that investigation, my son came home with a bruise in the center of his back, bigger than the size of my fist, deep purple, not something that a kid doesn't cry about for 30 minutes. That would have been prevented. If we had cameras, they would have pulled the kids or pulled the parents from those classrooms. And if it wasn't one of the ones accused already that was in the investigation, they would have been worried about it being documented, and this would have been prevented. These cameras are in 5 other states already, and they're going to be across the country because it's common sense. We protect our vulnerable children. So we have 2 choices. We can lead by example and be one of the first movers on this and protect our children, or we can follow in shame after more children are being abused. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Angela Sittler.
Hi. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and other delegates. I'm here as a parent. I live in District 6 in Baltimore County. I am the parent of an 18-year-old child who's been in special education self-contained classrooms since he was 3 years old. And in Baltimore County, when you leave and these children with special needs go into the school system, they go in the day they turn 3. So he was a brand new baby 3. He's physically and cognitively impaired and cannot speak. So he can't tell me good or bad what happens in the school day. So I have to trust that these teachers, these aides, the staff are doing the best for him what they can do. As you guys know, there's a huge staffing shortage. So even though I trust currently his staff and his teachers, they have constant influx of people, whether it be substitutes for the aides, the teacher or whatever. And while they are supposed to be background checked, all a background check shows is that a person who has done this before has not been caught. I know this as a case, it wasn't in school, but we had an in-home caregiver who had a spotless background check, who worked in law enforcement, who was subsequently arrested on child pornography charges and had multiple years behind him of child porn. If this, and then my son was never able to get the prosecution of being molested by this gentleman because there was no cameras, and my son, because of the cognitive impairment, was not able to be interviewed because it wouldn't have been okay. So cameras in school could prevent anything like this happening from our kids before. They also, if the staff knows these cameras are in the building, they will not be doing these kind of things well because they know that it can be pulled. Also, it'll help protect the staff, as was mentioned before, from any kind of false allegations. My son falls a lot. He comes home with bruises. The staff would be happen to know that if he fell and was noticed by, say, a doctor or somebody else working with my child, they would immediately be noted that it was an accidental, and this teacher or staff would not be pulled out for unnecessary false allegations that can ruin their lives. So I implore you guys to please vote favorable for this bill to protect the most vulnerable of our students.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Martha Mott, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you for hearing my testimony in support of House Bill 226. My name is Martha Mogad. While my children were enrolled at our local elementary school, I was a substitute in special ed classrooms for 2 years. I witnessed both verbal and physical abuse of special needs students by both teachers and instructional aides. The abuse of special education students by one teacher had been reported to school administrators by several aides over a 3-year period of time, and nothing happened. At the end of my second year of substituting, we took this information to Frederick County Public Schools. We reached out to the superintendent, Board of Education members, Child Protective Services, the Sheriff Department, and Maryland Department of Education. The school district opened an investigation, but the superintendent made the final decision to keep the teacher in the classroom and move him to different schools. The district attorney made the decision to not charge him because the victims weren't able to speak about what happened to them. If there had been video footage, it could have spoken for these children. As I started advocating for this bill, I began researching and found in the last 11 years, there have been more than $46 million in settlements paid to families of abused special ed children as a result of litigation filed because of abuse by their teachers and aides. Texas, West Virginia, and Louisiana have passed similar bills, and Georgia and Florida have passed laws to run pilot programs. Since passing these laws, abuse has been caught on video in their schools, and as a result, Texas and West Virginia are proposing amendments to their laws this year to strengthen them. Please support House Bill 226 to protect our most vulnerable students and give them a voice with cameras in their classrooms, as well as protecting their teachers from any false accusations. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Susan Reinhardt for 2 minutes, please.
Hi. Thank you, Madam Chair, to the committee for taking the time to hear Destiny's story. It's only one of too many. This is Destiny. Destiny has cerebral palsy. Destiny fought to live before she was born. She had a stroke in utero as a result of drug exposure. Destiny was born addicted to opiates and spent her first months of her life alone in a hospital. Brian and I adopted Destiny from foster care in Calgary County. We moved to Anne Arundel County when my husband received military orders to the United States Naval Academy. I'm here today asking you to consider allowing cameras in self-contained classrooms. For the sake of time, I'll just talk about 2 incidents. Destiny was wheeled off the bus one day with a broken leg. Destiny's 100% nonverbal. She's dependent upon a wheelchair. She has quadrispastic cerebral palsy. She can't use her hands the way we can. She can't feed by mouth. She was wheeled off the bus one day with a broken leg. The school doesn't know what happened. Sorry, I was hearing the other parents. I thought I was hearing the other parents. It's so hard to hear other people go through what you're going. This is Destiny. This broken leg resulted in surgery. Destiny had surgery, and to this day, we don't know what happened. I can tell you where the break of her leg did not happen. It didn't happen in the hallways because there were cameras and they were able to look at that. The break of her leg did not happen in the PE class because there was a camera. If only there was a camera in her classroom. We were told to move on. Second incident, a school employee was fired for physically mishandling Destiny. Employee was fired after another school employee viewed it and reported it. We were never told. Yes, you heard me correctly. My nonverbal child was physically assaulted by a school employee fired, and we were never told. How did I find out? I found out a week later when the fired employee called to tell me her side of the story. We called an IEP meeting with our attorney and AACPS, and we were told the fired employee had rights to her privacy. We still don't know what happened. At one point during the meeting, a school representative said they never imagined the fired employee would call me. Let that sink in. They never imagined we'd find out. Our attorney has a copy of the recording from this meeting, so does AACPS. This is fact. In sheer time, I know I'm running out. These are three more. I'm like shaking. This is Destiny wheeled off one day. If you see her nose, and then her eye. By the next day, it was all black. Again, she's nonverbal, and to remember, she's harnessed in a wheelchair, not for protection, for restraint, because she can't sit up. If she wasn't, she'd fall. So she's harnessed. Her feet are strapped again to help her. She can't move. She is just a target. So this bothers me because she's a target at school. And like everyone says, I believe a lot of it was kid on kid. This is burn marks on her neck. She had 3 incidents of this in 1 year. And as a child who's restrained in a wheelchair and the wheelchair locked down, she's a sitting, I had so many sleepless nights wondering, was someone strangling her? How do you get a burn mark like that? And this is why I'm here about the cameras as well. I want you to look at this, please. I know it's probably not great, but there's 40-something bruises on her legs. This was over weeks. Okay, when I say weeks, we kept calling the school. And actually, if you can see, there's a little pattern. It looked like an object with 2 things. Weeks. If there was a camera, because I'm pretty sure it was a student, if there was a camera after the second phone call that first week, they could have looked at the camera and seen that, yes, this was happening. Look at those legs. Again, she's strapped in there. Someone, like the shame she must have felt just being sit there and someone whacking her.
Miss Reinhardt, I'm gonna have to.
Okay. I will just say that Destiny now attends a non-public school, and I'm here to still speak up on behalf of all the Destinies. No one should have to go through that. And since starting at her school over a year ago, she hasn't had 1 injury. They have cameras. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Miss Andrea Medley Hasty, please, for 2 minutes.
Hello, thank you, everyone. Good evening. I'm in support of House Bill 226. I'm retired Prince George's County Public Safety, and not only have I ran calls for these types of abuse, but my grandson is autistic and was abused in Prince George's County Public School and at the Children's Guild at age 4 and age 6. If there were cameras, though Josiah is verbal, he cannot articulate his events of the day. If there had been cameras with Josiah's abuses, our answers to all of our questions would have been answered. To date, we have no answers to any of these questions. Josiah is 8. He has been to 5 schools, and I'm going to show a few pictures. He would cry every day when he had to go to school, and then these are his injuries that he sustained while being in the school. Bruises, this is him, how he would sit. If I would pop up in the school, this is how I would see him sitting, like he was just so frustrated and could not let us know what was going on. Just bruises and mark after mark, marks on his face, scratches where the hospital said it looked like he had been clawed. It was just, it's been a very, very long and trying process. More scratches on his face, no answers to any of our questions at all. It has been traumatic. We have spent thousands of dollars in legal fees, and for him to have a PTSD therapist. And I truly believe that if we had cameras in the classrooms, a lot of this would be alleviated and parents wouldn't have to feel like myself and the other ones, like Mr. Bain. I feel the same way. Like I was just sending him to the wolves every day and he's looking at me for protection, but I'm sending him to these people that are harming him. So I'm in favor of House Bill 226, and I hope everyone gets on board and protects our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Jacqueline Pennington, please, for 2 minutes. Which I don't see her in here. Jacqueline Pennington. Okay, and last, Craig Bowen. Are you in the room? Craig Bowen?
I don't think he's here, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Haley. Delegate Guyton, did you want to read the testimony of the gentleman that had to leave?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate your willingness to let me do that. He was testifying from Disability Rights Texas. He works in the school system and they are experiencing a terrible storm and they had to close early. So he was driving away as you were calling him, but I thank you for the flexibility. So we had him come and speak today because over the past couple of years, we've been asked about implementation in other states. How is this working? What are the issues? What are the concerns that have been raised in the past that seem to be dwindling? But have they come to fruition or have things been better or worse than expected? So I'm just going to read a few pieces of his letter. You do have it. You also have about 150 other letters from parents all over the state in the packet. So I hope that you'll take a look at those. This says, I'm providing the following information about the experience of Texas in providing cameras in special education classrooms. I serve as a supervising attorney of the education team at Disability Rights Texas and the protection advocacy agents in Texas. Texas Disability Rights was initially neutral on the Texas legislation providing for cameras in special education classrooms, but quickly found cameras to be invaluable tools in making classrooms safe for vulnerable students. We recognize that cameras were already common in public school common areas, institutional settings serving people with disabilities, and in law enforcement. We had concerns about potential impacts on student discipline, competing interests around privacy and parent access, and what we might learn practically from the camera footage. Reviewing camera footage has become a routine part of our work to investigate unknown injuries, but also to determine the appropriateness of restraint and crisis intervention when students are injured. There have been countless times when camera footage vindicated an educator or student or created a learning opportunity on how to better handle crisis intervention in the future. Camera footage has been most helpful in determining what occurred during restraints that resulted in injury or other crisis situations. Resulting in injury. Cameras can also provide some parents more peace of mind in sending a child back to school after an injury. I would point out that the cameras have been useful in special education behavioral classrooms where restraint is common, regardless of whether students use words to communicate. So we have not seen any of the potential downsides of cameras that we feared. We've not seen cameras in special education classrooms result in greater exclusionary discipline. In fact, we've seen the opposite occurred where expulsion was recommended before footage requested by the parent, but then the footage vindicated our client and the district withdrew the requested expulsion, or district attorneys decided not to prosecute the student. We have also been able to file grievances on school police officers for misconduct caught on camera when officers were responding in a classroom crisis. So the existence of videos have greatly expanded what we can do with our P&A investigations in public schools, which we have used to conduct systemic investigations of programs of concern. He goes on to talk about how they use some of this footage to actually come up with training programs and to document injuries in certain places. So it's a long letter. So I will also say in several cases, those involved in these investigations, abuse was uncovered on the video, resulting in findings of child abuse prosecution and loss of educator certifications. The benefits of cameras in the classroom have been undisputable.
Delegate Guyton,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask
You
you.
may cut me off.
I'm cutting him off, not you. But if you want to, I don't know if we already have that submitted as written, but certainly be submitted.
Certainly. Yeah. And then I appreciate it. I appreciate your tolerance on that. We were almost to the bottom. Basically, they say they were very concerned and now they love it and they want to expand it. So that's the message from Texas. And you also have a letter from West Virginia who also has this program in great support.
Thank you. So that concludes the testimony. I do see 2 questions. Delegate Palakovich-Carr and then Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question actually for Delegate Guyton. My recollection is that when we've heard this bill in past years that MSEA, I think, was opposed to the legislation, and I might have missed it when you were giving your testimony earlier on. Do they have a position on the bill this year?
They do not have a position on the bill at all this year. They have worked with us very carefully to make sure that they were comfortable with the language.
Thank you.
Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, you know, those of you who know me, this is very important to me as a father of a 7-year-old who's a nonverbal autistic child at Hickory Elementary in Harford County. You know, first, all the parents that gave testimony today, thank you for your courage and your bravery. This is not an easy thing to talk about, the thing that scares us all the most, our nonverbal child being abused, and worse yet, not being able to express themselves to us. It keeps all of us up every night. And to Tracy, obviously, we've been in contact with you, and we're going to make sure we do everything we can to help you find justice in your matter as well. So thank you, Delegate Guyton and Delegate Lugie, for bringing this forward. And I'm going to do everything I can to push this forward. Thank you for testifying today. I appreciate it.
Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 226. Thank you all very much.